everyone, and welcome to week 7. I want to give a quick reflection on the discussion post from last week. So I wrote down quite a few things in randomness as I was reading through. And first off, I do appreciate folks taking on the weighty material. The material for this week is likely to be challenging as well. Every week in this class, you should feel challenged a little bit. Thinking about, the microaggressions and the term microaggressions in the videos. Uh, I don't know that, the first video, it appeared to me to be very obvious about the issues and the problems. As a supervisor with regards to the first video, there were some really good ideas with maybe reading some autobiographies, maybe some self-reflection, maybe even a person's own like a self-reflection, like that person's relationship with people of color, um, throughout their history, like an autobiography of themselves, maybe even thinking about maybe if there are some deep-seated issues, maybe their own counseling. Again, with microaggressions, they they can be, um, I think, intentional. Sometimes I think some people can be intentionally mean, but a lot of times microaggressions in counseling are just simply, the water that people swim in, and typically it's the culture that you're around that determines that water that you can't really see, but that you may step into. So it is important to recognize again that matrix, the social justice matrix, where we're talking about power and privilege and situating oneself and one's own identities among that, uh, within that matrix. With that idea, when people say something, depending on where you're situated in that matrix of power or oppression, it words come out differently, meanings come out differently. People in one place on that in that matrix may say one thing, and it's not meant to be offensive, but it comes out offensive. I I went. I'll go through. This is a related example, but not completely 100% aligned with it. But in in my training, in my time as learning to different styles of leadership, there are different leadership models. And one of the leadership models that tries to integrate a pluralistic understanding of society is the concept of maybe even leading from behind. And what that means is that allowing other voices to speak and be heard is oftentimes more desirable than having a person in authority say something. Because as a person in authority says something, it comes across in a different way than a person in in a different situation, and again to different groups of people. So for instance, maybe even the second video where there were, and I had mixed feelings too. So many of you had mixed feelings on the second video with the counselor in that case disclosing their own experiences of racism. And so people had kind of a spectrum of responses of, well, you shouldn't self-disclose, to, yeah, the self-disclosure, looked impactful. I, I will say I don't know the degree of acting that's portrayed in that video. It seemed pretty authentic to me as far as the folks, the individuals in that video. Uh Self-disclosure when it's placed well can be good. And I know that goes a little bit against the grain in what, you're instructed in strategies and techniques because you're trying to get away from layperson habits. But if you're trying to be authentic with your self-disclosure and you don't take the focus and put it on yourself, which a couple of you said, yeah, it kind of seemed like the focus of the session went somewhere else. But in the end, it looked like the client felt a little more heard because at least the counselor was trying to relate something that's not one-to-one. Their identities, their who they are as people, they're different people, and they were both part of oppressed groups. And so as a person who's a member of an oppressed group relating to another person, well, this was my experience. It's not the same. If I think maybe if it were more clearly articulated, I know it's not equivalent to your experience. This is what I've experienced. And I felt like he did a decent job of kind of not trying to one up. I think the what is at risk there is if somebody is sharing an experience to kind of one up their client or say it's equal to. And I think that's where we risk taking over the session. Um, so again, as I speak to you, I'm, here, I'm not a member of either of the or any of the press categories in the video. And so my voice is, well, what do you know, right? And please know that uh, as a member of privileged groups, I intentionally try to listen hard. I also try to intentionally watch what I say, not in that I'm just always walking on eggshells, but that I want to be supportive and I want to my one of my main orientations as an instructor is for people to have their voice and for people to have their voices heard. Because I truly feel that when we listen to each other, and we listen to where our experiences are different, and we also listen to where our experiences are the same, that's where we can situate ourselves and more effectively communicate with each other and more effectively help each other. And again, I go back to that power and oppression, social justice matrix. It's been my experience of observing society that power works really hard to maintain power, and that unless there are intentional actions taken to include others in the sharing of power, voices are excluded, people are marginalized. And for whatever, we can critique politics, policies, this and that. We're a part of a bigger system, and we can't deny that. It's there. Um, and so power again can offer to share power. One of the a couple of you mentioned in your responses that as far as systemic, okay, how do we address this on a systemic in a systemic way? A couple of you mentioned uh, having diverse viewpoints and people representing diverse groups in positions of power. And I think that's important because even, okay, well, we're just gonna appropriate what things that we want, the people in power. It comes off wrong. So, not to borrow too much, but for us, by us, is it something that that truly represents a group of people. And again, within the spectrum of an individual within a group, there are going to be individuals that align more closely with, maybe the what might be considered stereotypes of a group. So it's difficult information, gang. It really is, and it should be. And so for those of you that have shared deeply personal like things that they struggle with, like very specifically, I know it's a lot of you are speaking more in general terms, and I can read that. And I really hope, it's my sincere hope that if you are speaking in very general terms, that you can feel safe enough to mention things that are more specific to you, because that helps you work through this in this context. Um, Now I feel like there are a few of you that are vague intentionally because it's like this is kind of hitting a nerve. And that would have been me at one time. It very honestly would have been me. Um, and it oftentimes takes time to think through, to sit with uncomfortable information and come to a place of congruence versus internal dissonance. But I would be remiss if I didn't say to really look at it when you feel the dissonance, because it's something speaking to you there. I'll stop there. I just wanted to reflect that I wanted to say that I appreciated what you all were talking to. A couple things. The first video is that fundamental attribution error. Is that person? It sounds like that person is really looking at. To me, that's an illustration of the fundamental attribution error. Is that you have a counselor that's really looking at that individual's faults or their disposition versus the situation, disposition versus situational factors. A fundamental attribution error is where we look at somebody's disposition and assume it's because their disposition versus this situational awareness. We're guilty of that as a culture, the United States in particular. Um, so I thought that was interesting. Uh, yeah, I think that was it. I think that's the main nuts and bolts. I have a couple of things, but again, for those of you going into depth, I really appreciate that. I appreciate the idea of and the ideas that y'all are sharing. So, okay, I'll create another video.